Hi. In this lecture, we're going to be covering the Luma Keyer. So what we're going to do is use the Luma Keyer on this element and a couple of other elements that we have in this script, such as this snow element and another foreground snow element, a foreground fog pass, and our sky element. So we're going to use the Luma Keyer to set up some mats for these elements. And to begin with, first thing we want to do is our landscape element is an HD 1920 by 1080 plate. So we want to make sure we set our project setting to match that resolution so everything behaves as we'd expect. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to set this to HD 1920 by 1080, and our frame range we're going to set 1 to 100. So to begin with, we're going to grab a Luma Cure for this landscape element, and our goal is to use the Luma Cure to remove the sky in this plate so that we could add our own sky element, another sky element behind that. So to begin with, we're just going to grab a Luma Cure, and that's called Keyer in Nuke. And the Luma Keyer is pretty straightforward if I pop this out. Right now, we're not seeing anything here, but if we look at our alpha channel, you could see if I disable this, right now it's our solid alpha, but if I enable the Luma Keyer, our alpha channel has become what this keyer is showing us. And by default, this is the range set on the Luma Keyer. So if you pull the A slider in, it pushes in all the blacks or mid ranges in. And if you bring in this slider, this side in, you could see we're pushing more white into our midtone ranges so we could blow out this alpha. So what we want to do is essentially pull in this slider on the Luma Keyer to get a solid black for these elements for the most part, as far as that we can get, so that we could pretty much be just isolated to the sky here. But before I do that, just a couple things said in this Luma Cure. Right now, it's just based on luminance, but you do have the option of using different channels for your Cure in addition to using saturation and max and min Cure. So, for example, if we wanted to use saturation, this is what that Cure would look like. So again, you could manipulate based on the saturation here. So it's pretty handy to go through these and kind of have an idea of what you wanted to do with the Luma Cure. So for our example here, we could either just go off of luminance, which we seem to have enough range off of, or we could try to do the red Cure just to give us a little bit more latitude. So for right now, I think I'm just going to go back to the Luma Cure operation for the luminance. And let's try to set this up. So I'm just going to go a little bit closer in on this, and I'm going to slide this slider in. Trying to get as much of those mountains as we could get, including the water. So that's not too bad right now. We still have some ranges in here that we should try to get rid of. So let's push this in a little bit more. That's pretty good. And then we could slide in the sea slider in until everything in our clouds start to go towards white. Sliding this out a little bit more just so I could get a bit more of the clouds back there. So that's pretty good. And in this case, what we want to do, I want to use this inverted matte so that we retain all the foreground, but we lose the sky here. So we could either do invert here, as you could see by checking this invert bot, or we could use a node called invert, and that will invert this alpha for us as well too. So it's up to you whether you want to invert in here or just use the luminance, the invert option within the Luma Cure. Now that we've got that set up, what we could do is copy this into our alpha channel. So we have this, and then we could say copy and set the B input to our image, and our A input will be the alpha. And then now if we pre-molt this out, you could see we've completely removed our sky, which is what we wanted to do. We could clean some of these areas up a little bit further, but for right now, we'll just leave it at that. And let's move on to using the Luma Cure for our practical snow elements. This is pretty straightforward. So if you look at our foreground snow element, we don't have an alpha channel, but since this image is over black and our snow elements are close to white, getting a Luma key for this will be very easy. So we'll just go Keyer again. And there you go. We're looking at our alpha channel and we have the snow in our alpha. We could push this a little bit more as far as trying to get some of these more solid, but since snow is transparent, we don't want to crunch these up too much. So if we slide this in, we'll just leave it somewhere like that. We want to have a little bit of transparency in here. If we go too far and everything looks like this, and if we sample this value, you could see it's not going above 1 in our alpha, but if we were to put this over an image, we'd probably have some black edges around things. So we don't want to push it that far. So I'm just going to slide this back out and have more of a normal tonal range in here. And if we sample our blacks, it's shown that we're at 0, which is great. So we essentially have black and white here. So we'll leave that Luma Cure for our foreground snow, and let's do the same thing for our midground snow. And I'm going to grab another Cure and pop this out real quick. And then same thing in here. Let me get rid of this eyedropper. Now we're looking at our alpha channel. I'm going to slide this in as well. And I'll slide in the blacks in a bit too. And I think that's pretty good. We'll leave that for now as well. We could always adjust this as we go, but for now, that's a good starting point. And lastly, let's do the Luma Keyer for our fog element. So we'll go Keyer, and that's what our fog element looks like in its color channels. And as you can see, we have no alpha, but if we look at our lumens key, now we've got this fog element as well. So we'll do the same thing here. Using the luminance key, we'll push in the blacks a little bit just so we have a little bit more solid alpha in here. And then I'll just slightly push in the whites too, because we want this to be a bit transparent. We don't want any like overly dense alpha like that for this fog element. So we'll just kind of leave this right about there too. And then we can always boost it as we go along. But there you have it. We just use the Luma key for these elements that we're going to assemble in the coming video.